This tutorial is a very brief explanation of the concept of blending layers in Adobe Photoshop. So I prepared a file for you which is grayscale. If you go here to image mode, you see grayscale is checked here. This means that all colors here are just different shades of gray, and they differ only by brightness. So you have like light white, black, and then different shades of gray in between. I've opened the info panel here for you, and you see the colors in Photoshop are usually characterized by hue, saturation, and brightness. But for grayscale images, there is no hue, there is no saturation, there's just brightness. And when I move my cursor over the canvas, here you will see the value of the color, and in this case you will just see the brightness. So you see here everywhere brightness is 100% because all pixels in this only visible layer which I have here, all pixels are white, so brightness is 100% everywhere. Alright, now if I create a new layer and draw something on it like this, what will happen is that I draw it with some sort of light gray. It's 75% brightness here, as you see. So the pixels here will cover the pixels beneath it. So you will see this light gray pixels on layer 1, and you will not see the white pixels on layer 0 because they're covered, and the color here on layer 1 is non-transparent. Alright? It's like working with oil paint which covers everything underneath. Now if I create a new layer here and I take a different color and like again draw on it, so you will see that this new layer, layer 2, will cover partly layer 1. So part of the light gray pixels on layer 1 will become invisible because they are covered by the darker gray pixels on layer 2. And then the white layer, white pixels on layer 0 are covered partly by layer 2 and partly by layer 1, so they're invisible. And that happens because by default, when I create a new layer in Adobe Photoshop, its blending mode is normal and its opacity is 100%. And this means that the pixels have just non-transparent color, and it covers the colors on all the layers that are below. Now let me change the opacity of layer 2. Opacity is the opposite of transparency. So opaque is non-transparent and transparent is non-opaque. Alright? So now I have like 100% opacity. That means I have 0% transparency. Alright? So let me now change the opacity to like, let us say 50% here. And then as I see, the pixels on layer 2, they become transparent, 50% transparent. So the resulting color now, the color that I see here in this area, is a mix between this dark gray on layer 2 and this light gray on layer 1. So this is the mix of this dark gray and light gray, 50-50. Now in this area I have a mix between this dark gray on layer 2 and the white on layer 0, so therefore this area is lighter, as you see. Yeah. So changing opacity is one way of mixing colors, of blending layers with each other. So here the layer 2 doesn't just cover layer 1 and 0, but it blends with them, creating a mix of colors. All right? But you can do much more than changing opacity, and that is what blending modes are about. And that is what I want to show you. So let me set opacity to 100% again here, and I have prepared a special layer for you to demonstrate how blending modes work. So as you see, I have a picture here, but I also have shades of gray starting from 100% brightness, 90% brightness to like 0% brightness. So you have different shades of gray here. And for your reference, because I will be changing the blending mode of this layer here, and for you to remember what colors you had here, I have added another layer which has exactly the same shades of gray here on top. So when this changes, you will still have this top layer to remind you what the original value of brightness was on this blending layer. All right. So now blending modes are here, as you see, and they are divided into groups. And there are blending modes which are darkening, like those. You see? They make the bottom pixels darker depending on the value of darkness in the top layer, in the blending layer. Yeah? And as you see, like darken, for example, it makes pixels below below layer, this blending layer, make it darker only if this layer is darker than what is underneath. Multiply makes it darker the more it itself is dark. So as you see, white does nothing. Light gray darkens a little bit. Darker gray darkens a little bit more. Black darkens 100%. It makes it just 100% black. 10% brightness, you still can see the difference here. You see, here there is no difference, it's just all black. So if you multiply by black, the result will be black. But multiply by dark gray will be darker, and the darker the gray, the stronger the darkening will be. And then there are other darkening modes like color burn, which is more radical but doesn't affect white, as you see. Linear burn, which is also quite radical, much more radical than multiply. Yeah, it's stronger. But all they darken the pixels underneath the blending layer. All right? And then there's darker color, but it's not available in grayscale because it's based on colors, and we have no colors here. All right? And then there are lightening modes, which are just lighten is the same as the opposite of darken. So it only affects pixels underneath if pixels on top themselves are lighter. And then there is screen. You see, this makes everything lighter, but depending on how light it is. So screening by black does nothing. Screening by white gives white, and screening by different shades of gray, as you see, makes it lighter, and this lightening effect is the stronger the lighter the gray is. You see? And then you have other lightening modes like dodge, which is more radical and stronger, and linear dodge, which is even stronger. All right? And then you have another group of layers which increase the contrast, like overlay. So what happens here is that white makes the pixels underneath strongly lighter. Black makes the pixels underneath strongly darker. Now gray, the more near it is to 50% gray, the less effect it has. So the lighter the pixels on this blending layer, the stronger the lightening effect. The darker the pixels on the blending layer, the stronger the darkening effect, and in the middle, just nothing happens. It just increases contrast, so to say. All right, and then we have other blending modes like this. Soft light, which does the same as overlay, only softer. And then you have hard light, which does also basically the same, but only very much stronger. And then you have like vivid light and linear light and pin light, which are like really strong, and hard mix, which is really radical, like this. Like it gives you really, really strong differences. Basically gives you, in this case, just really black and white. So it's either black or white. Yeah, so if it darkens like really 100%. If it lightens really 100%. And then you have also blending modes which are called difference blending modes, and which measure basically the difference between the layers that you have. Yeah, so if there is no difference between layers, then the resulting color will be black. So as you see here, you have almost no difference between, like here, you have almost no difference between this top layer and this dark gray. So the result is almost black. The higher the difference between the two layers, the lighter the result. All right, so this is also a very interesting blending mode. Anyhow, I just want you to know that these blending modes exist, and I also want you to know that opacity is still available, but in this case opacity doesn't mean how transparent the pixels in the blending layer are. It means just the strength of this effect. So you have this difference blending here and to 100% strength. And you can like decrease the opacity, then you will still have this difference blending, but just to a lower percentage. You see, so by regulating the opacity, you can just weaken or strengthen the blending effect. All right. So in this way, so this is one of the ways in which layers can work in Adobe Photoshop, is that there are different ways of mixing the blending layer with everything that's below it. Yeah, and so the blending layer not just covers, as it would in case of normal, it would just cover the pixels and show only its own color. But if you change the blending mode, then the colors here will mix with the color underneath in different ways. All right, so for you it would be just nice to try out all these mixing algorithms and see how they work. And remember that you can change blending mode here and opacity here. That's all about blending modes, and you can see a detailed explanation in the other tutorial that I have supplied from Adobe, where all these blending modes are explained in great detail. That is all. Thank you.